And a very good evening to you. I'm Lisa Lord, and my special guest for this one-on-one is the president and founder of the Men Empowerment Network Support, or MENS, Mr. Fabian Sargeant. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Now, you founded MENS back in 2019 as an advocacy group for men. Tell us a little bit about the organization. And first of all, why did you find it necessary to have an organization like this?
Men Empowerment Network Support came about because I had a very unfortunate situation where I would have lost my sister at the hands of her husband. And, it was a very, very painful event. I went through about, 2-3 years of grieving. But then there was an event that happened in Warrens where there was a dad and there were some children who got burnt up in a fire. And there was a lot of talk around that. And a lot of men reached out to me, and I just thought that I needed to do something with the skill set that I have as a social worker, counselor, to reach out to assist these men. And, and that was it. I reached out to the Barbados Family Planning and set a date to use the conference room and just put it on social media, set a date. I just wait to see who show up, and the room was filled with men on that day. And the reason for that particular meeting really was, I find that whenever there's a situation, domestic situation, particularly between male spouses or whatever the case is, a lot of the attention is focused towards the victim. We have a lot of support groups out there. We have a lot of groups that are trying to, just really help women, particularly to get through the ordeal. But I see it really as most of these groups dealing with the symptoms of a deeper problem. And the problem from research, we see that men are the main perpetrators of domestic violence. So I took it upon myself, along with a very, very good team I had at that point in time, to really put initiatives in place to cater to men, so that we can start changing the whole mindset, that whole emotional and psychological disposition of men. And and that is, and from there, everything is just history, just evolved and evolved and evolved.
I'll come back to the symptoms though, but I want to deal with some of the initiatives, some of the programs that you do offer to men at this point.
So we have our flagship program, which is something called Men's Talk. Now, we just create an environment where men just come out and talk. We don't usually put any topic or theme or anything, just men's talk. And once men get in that space, we start to talk about relationships, politics, sex, anything that would affect men, and the discussion usually evolves. And that particular discussion usually have a number of professionals around it. So it's just not a free talk and structured environment. We have professionals, including myself, I've been to all of them, who would help guide the discussion, who would help provide any psychological support, because most of them ended in tears, because men got so comfortable that they shared some very deep things that they never spoke about before in their life. Things that happened deep in their childhood, things that happen in relationships, whether it be sexual abuse, because we don't really hear a lot about young boys or men as it relates to sexual abuse, and women, so men get, and they speak about things that happen, that how they were treated by parents, and things that they took from their childhood up to their adulthood and affected them even in their own personal relationships and intimacy, and even affected them as parents. So that environment that we create, that flagship program, is a big thing. The least amount of men we've had for any session would have been about 25. Is always a packed event. So we were doing it like twice a month, and then we started doing it once a month. So we have men's talks. We do it the last Saturday of every month. We're starting back the end of March 2022. And we also are starting something called Motivational Mondays. Coming out of the COVID environment, a lot of men have been stressed out. They were not coping well. We've had a lot of job loss. We've had a number of men who were unable to see their children for whatever reason, whatever excuse was given. And we thought it necessary to put things in place to really motivate men help men to tap into their strengths to reach deep inside, and even in terms of employment or generating their own income, and they would have lost jobs, so jobs are not that easily these days. So how do you tap into self? How do you really reach and understand who you are as an individual and really get out there and start living again? So Motivational Mondays is a 6-part series hosted. We're going to have it facilitated by Inspire Leadership Solutions, which is with Imran Richards and his team. And they're very dynamic. Anybody know Imran? Very, very dynamic group. And they're going to take the whole Motivational Mondays. Outside of the 2 of those, we have individual counseling. We have some counselors on board. And we also probably channel that through the Barbados Family Planning as well. And we have group counseling. We are looking at some other major projects like documentaries and social media programs and so forth, but that will be probably later on in the year. We're just observing the environment, and we're trying to source some funding for a number of these things.
So based on what you said, a lot of these issues stem from childhood trauma.
A lot of them, most of them, yeah. Yeah, we grew up in a culture where children are taught not to open their mouth. Children are taught not to communicate, and that's the reality. That's our culture. Shut up in here. You're a man in here, don't talk. You're beating, don't cry in here. He's not allowed to cry. He's not, and I say boys particularly, he's not allowed to cry. He's not allowed to express himself. He doesn't even understand what he's feeling, and these boys absorb these behaviors, they take them because where do they go with them? So from a child, they're socialized in such a way to be hard, You gotta be a man, be strong, be hard. What does that mean? Don't cry in here. And then they're going into adolescent phase now where they're becoming a lot more self-aware, becoming more in tune with their emotions and feelings and how they feel towards another sex or whatever the case is, And even as they become a lot more self-aware, a lot of parents usually find that phase more challenging, because that boy now is transitioning from a child into a young man. He's thinking differently. He's acting differently. He wants to explore. He wants to experiment. He wants his own identity. These are things that happen. And then the way they're treated, they're not allowed to express themselves again. And you get to see how the lack of communication or how lack of communication skills is being played out from that young childhood up into the adolescent phase. We even look at things that you can look at attachment. They are not allowed to pass through their developmental stages in a holistic way. They are not able to deal with a lot of the internal conflicts that they may have. There's nowhere to turn. The relationship with parents is very shaky. So all of these are things that are compounded. And then these are men you then put in the world, because now the same young man then go and gets involved in a relationship with someone who then takes that lack of communication to that relationship, that sometimes they don't even know to express themselves. They don't know how to even talk, how to even start the conversation. They don't know how to even deal with when things go south in a relationship. How do you rebuild that? How do you emotionally connect with your partner? So because of that lack of emotional connectivity and communication and all of these things you can speak about as a child that they did not really have in childhood, then you see them playing out later on. Another big one, responsibility. I know I work with young people, and I could tell you that there are a lot of young people that can't even make up a bed. They can't even fold clothes. They get up when they feel like, they do what they feel like, how they feel like, and speak to people in whatever way. You understand? Good, we can talk about parenting just now. But when that happens, that behavior, that lack of responsibility, picture a guy who displays all of what I just mentioned, go and live with a lady. He can't cook, he can't clean, he can't wash. He discourages everybody. So what is going to happen when he's in a relationship with her? She gets pregnant. He never had the parents to really show him the correct way. Maybe based on culture, the father was never around. Me or not. So he really don't have a real picture of what parenting is. Parenting doesn't come with a manual, and then he becomes a father. And we as a society expect him to be the best father possible. Not saying that he cannot be, or that he cannot learn skills or ask people, or he may not be inclined to do some research and say, well, look, you know, I experience this, I don't want my children to go through that. Well, that is the case. In some instances, it is not the case in many. And then those children replicate that behavior.
Let's stick a pin in the fathering bit because that deserves some attention all by itself.
Yeah.
Based on what you're saying about this childhood trauma, you're a men's advocacy group. However, then, if you're identifying that these are issues that stem from childhood, are you also working with boys?
So we have a program called Young MENS. You know, the group has only been in existence for about 2.5 years, just about. And so we spend a lot of time developing what we are doing, our programs, taking time to do some evaluation and monitoring to see, to tweak here and there and see what is needed so that we can address needs. And as you said, we identified that the issue was the issue stems from that childhood. So we started our Young Men's program, and that was done through the guidance counselor at Dayton Griffith School. The principal there was very, very accommodating, and they enjoyed that program. Look, let me tell you, it was amazing. Where you had boys, we used the 4 farmers. We didn't want to interrupt the 5 farmers in their CXCs and so forth, but we used the 4 farmers. And if you hear the information that was divulged from these children during these talks and these sessions, you know, very, very, very moving. These boys were able to really do a lot of introspection and look at themselves. And they felt comfortable enough to say, well, look, you know, this is what happening in my life. This is what I am going through. Guidance counselor opened up her eyes, like, whoa, you know. And that showed that there's a need for a space for men to share, men and boys. You know, there are a lot of professionals out there, professional women particularly, who do not believe that there's a need for all-male space. You know, they believe, oh, but if men can facilitate that, well, we could do it too. We are the ones who are mothers and all that. That is okay. And we've had women who did a phenomenal job as mothering and raising boys and so forth. But it comes a point in time where we have to accept that a boy and a man will be a man. And a man needs that space. He needs another male who can connect with him on that level. You know, as I said, we reason with one another on a different level. When a man and woman talking is different from a man and a man talking, a man can reason with you. Two men will cuss one another, know, and then go and drink a beer and say, well, like, yeah, everything good. You know, when a man, when it happens with a female, this all up and then things long. So the reality is that men communicate differently with each other, and they need that space because they can identify. Even the language is different in an all-male space. If one woman comes in that space, it changes.
I'm not going to touch that one at all. Moving forward, you made the comment about it is our culture, or it is in our culture for fathers to not be there. Is that a fair comment?
It is fair because if you really check a number of the communities across Barbados, even research, you know, fathers are absent from the homes in many instances. Now, I guess the question then would be, why are fathers absent from the homes? I make no apologies, and I don't support delinquency. We have some men who are downright delinquent. They can afford to support the children financially. They may have their homes. I mean, they have the necessary resources to be a good parent, but chooses not to be a good parent for whatever issue they may be going through in their head. And I think sometimes a lot of this boils back to what we were discussing earlier about childhood trauma too, not being able to accept responsibilities and so forth. So
are their fathers not being there as well?
Are their father not being there, setting that example for them? So that is one end. But then we do have situations where there are fathers who want to be a part of their children's lives and who are not being allowed to be a part of their children's life because of whatever issues that father and mother may have. You know, there may be a court situation, which is often the case. There may be issues where there's family don't want the man around. And I know of many men actually come to the organization, Men Empowerment Network Support, because of that. They want to be in their children's lives. They want to support their children. I know a man who brought 2 checks that were returned. 2 checks of substantial amount of money. So sometimes it even goes beyond money. You know, even though we have a system where parenting or fathering is limited to money. If you can't provide $1, if you can't pay X, you can't be a father to this child.
Are you saying that the system is disadvantageous to fathers?
Yes, I am saying that the system is disadvantageous to fathers. It is. It is. We have situations where men try their best. Men go to court and get court orders. I've seen court orders, men in tears, big, strapped men, tall, men crying, saying, look, but this is what the court order says, sir. Look at this. And women are blatantly disregarding that court order. They don't care about it because they know when they go to the court, nothing is going to happen. So they're, in my opinion, using the system to their advantage. You know, sometimes a father is only allowed to get a child during the weekend. And when he goes for that child during the weekend, there's a lot of activities. The girl got to get her hair plait, the boy got lessons, he got swimming, you know. How much time is it in there for that father to spend with the child? And if he does not take the child to the activities, then he's being a bad father. Oh, but you want to cash this place and you don't let him do this. How sort of father you is? There's also another major issue. There is this perception that men can't raise girls. Now, there's a lot of issues with fathers and girl children. There are a lot of people who believe that a man should not be raising a daughter or girl child, even though we've had numerous, we can speak of a lot of success stories, you know, grown women who can speak clear about how beneficial their father was to them. But there's still a perception that fathers can't raise girl children. So a lot of fathers get problems with seeing the girl children. We had COVID that just hit, whoa. You see the COVID lockdown? It was even worse because people were asking for a list of all the persons that this child is going to go wrong. So some fathers made the responsible decision where like, you know, we're not supposed to be mixing up and for your own sake. But then there were some fathers that wanted to see their children because granted, some of these children may live in a house with the mom who have an extended family or family who go out and come in too. You know, the father's house may have people that go out and come in. So it's a toss-up, you know. But the fathers are being given this hard-handed type of behavior where you have to provide a list of every single person that you take my child around. My child, not our child, is my child now. Don't talk about if the man got a new girlfriend. Woman don't want she child around the other woman. And this is a reality. You know as a woman you gonna know. The woman want, no. What should you do with my child? She may not got the standards you have, or so you may believe. These are things that men have to put up with, and these are reasons sometimes that men can't even see the children. And the whole system, although they have these core orders which says, I am supposed to have my child for X, Y, and Z, nothing is happening. And these men are becoming so frustrated. And that is why our support groups and individual counseling is so important. Because a lot of these men are pushed beyond their tolerant level. And they have some thoughts and they want to do some real bad things, and you got to get them, you know, thinking about like, you know, that don't make sense. Because at the end of the day, you still got to live for this child. You know, it's a phase. It's going to be difficult, but we try to work with men to get them emotionally balanced. You know, help them to balance their thoughts and emotions, because going through the system is extremely stressful for men. Very seldom you hear men talk about success stories through the system. You know, and that is one of the things that we really need to pay close attention to, because it is not fair. You asked about fairness earlier. It is not fair to a father. I mean, I'm a father, and it will break me in a million pieces not being able to see my children. They are my life. They are part of me. They are not something that I just want to see on a weekend. I mean, I just want to see my children on the weekend. If I wake up in the morning, the only time I wake up, I don't see my children is if I'm overseas. So I know as a father, I am passionate about that, because I believe that a father should be able to see his children just as often as the mother sees the children. And both parties should be responsible enough to understand that that child is central to the whole situation. Now, Lisa, I ain't gonna get here and trick the system and talk about things, but I know men do a lot of foolishness too. I know sometimes that there are situations where there has been abuse, physical abuse in relationships. We're talking this thing real. I know these things happen, you know, and there's no excuse for it. I am vehemently against any form of abuse. But that is why we need to pretty much bridge the gap between the men advocacy and the women so that we can work the situation out. Because sometimes these men go through, as we mentioned earlier, again, it can back up a lot of childhood trauma. They're dealing with a lot of issues and they need help working through these issues. But sometimes their children just be their motivation to move on and all. These children are the ones to say, well, you know, these men get to say, well, what I am doing is for my children, and not being able to see that child, you know. Sometimes some of these men don't even want to move forward. So we got to find a way how we can help with the whole behavioral change process. Again, as I said, I'm definitely not for abuse, and I understand that there are women who have to protect themselves and who believe, well, if a male can be abusive to me, then he can be abusive to my child. I understand that. But there's also abuse on the flip side, because we have a lot of men in Barbados that get beat. I know for a fact men who get stabbed, who get hit, get slapped, get put out, go sleep in the rain. All of these are things that we got to deal with. We don't hear about it, but you know what? Children are observing these things too. And a lot of this is what is perpetuated. The cycle, you know what I mean? These cycles continue because the child can sit down and watch the mother beat the father, or the father beat the mother, and this, we're no parenting. This is where we got to look at family, or who was said of family conflict resolution strategies. How do we get past that? Sometimes that girl, if that woman who's abusive, passed her whole life of abuse, or even, you know, exposed to her environment where your family has been fighting, the environment has been fighting. So all she know to deal with, how to deal with her conflict is by fighting. So she and the man fall out, she up her pet saying that he. And it happened for men too. So while I am a big part of men advocacy, and I support the empowerment of men, I equally support the empowerment of women, because we cannot progress as men if the women are not progressing with us. And I think that a lot of that is, you see, I don't want to be all over the place, but then what comes to mind is the whole feminist movement. I mean, rightfully so. The movement came about to empower women. Women were suppressed for many years. But sometimes when you go too far one side, then you create another challenge. You know, where you empower all the women, you have all the education for women, you celebrate women, you have UN women, you have everything for women, funding millions and millions of dollars to empower women, which I support. But however, there are not that much resources for men. So we have women who are moving forward psychologically and emotionally, and they're doing well for themselves, equipping themselves with necessary skills for the world. But somehow, we seem to be leaving the men behind. Somehow the men seems to be trailing behind because there are not that much resources. When you hear about gender, it's women. I mean, that should not be the case. That is not the case. I did a course, I can say it here. I did a course at university, one of the hardest courses that I did recently. Hardest courses I ever did. When I say hard because it challenged me as an individual, not that it was hard per se to pass or whatever. But 95% of the course was on feminism and up in the movement and improving. And that is, you know, a very small percentage spoke about masculinity. And these are things that we need to change. Because if the university and the academic institutions are the ones driving the agenda, then we have problems on our hands for our young boys who be coming up. Because there's no empowerment. I can't say no because there are courses, yes, we have courses on masculinity.
But not on the scale that feminine.
I would label it as 95% towards women and about that 5% towards men. When I saw the course outlined, I was like, wow, I don't know how we can survive in this course. You know, there's no balance. And that is what we need. We need balance. I understand it's people equality, and rightfully so. Again, I agree with a lot of these things. But we have to be fair again in how we approach the whole system as it relates to empowerment for men and women.
You mentioned the whole issue of domestic violence. You said that you do get reports of men also being victims, being abused by women. However, is it still a situation where the men are ashamed to report those instances to the police?
Of course. Of course. The men are, you see, it's a pretty thing. A man shouldn't get beat. The woman shouldn't be beating a man. And that is what we think. That is the mindset, you know. For a man being abused by a woman, the men can laugh at him. And that's the problem. So he's not going to be inclined to want to access the police or any services.
Could you give me an example of what you've seen in the organization in terms of people reaching out for help?
As much as yesterday. You know, I was dealing with a case where this guy was stabbed twice by his partner. And the case went through the court. It was going through the court system. And based on his assessment, he's the person that can get the heavy hand. You know, even though he, quote unquote, was the victim of the whole situation.
He bears the wounds.
You understand? And there was evidence about everything, but he seemed to have this, quote unquote, appear to have the strength in the relationship, and you know, and these things happen. These things are happening. I know of men who are in very high places, let me say in the forces, men that are supposed to be strong, who are beaten by their women. There are men who come to the organization, not all the time, because they approach the organization smartly. They come and whenever we got offering, but then when you delve deeper, you really understand what is happening, then the truth comes out. But sometimes, actually most of the calls we get are from women. You may have, most of the calls we get are from women about men. So you will have a sister calling saying, but my brother going through this. I talk to he will talk to you. But I talk to her. And she made the contact, and then that's how it happens. Men hardly ever call first. Some do, but hardly ever. A mother may call for her son. A wife call for her husband. That is how the calls usually come. You know, a female may say, a male may confide in a female. And you know, she will call and say, well, I have a friend who's going through X, Y, and Z. Another issue that men face is that of sexuality. But that's a whole other topic altogether. Because we have a number of men who, due to their sexuality, sometimes more so homosexuality, they go through tremendous issues. Mental health is a major issue because they're not accepted in the home. Their friends, workmates, and sometimes they're going through their own internal conflict because it is like, but why am I this way? Why do I feel this way? For people that understand sexuality, you know, some people believe, man, that's a choice. But if you understand sexuality in its truest form or sense, you realize, well, you know, it really ain't a choice. You know, these are how these people are. These are how life is made up. And sometimes they have to interact with their social environment that is not friendly. And then they go through a whole set of depression and you know, sometimes even accessing some services. The stigma and discrimination towards homosexuality is terrible.
All right, we'll take a break here. Stay with us. You're watching One-on-One.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ronette Boyne, and we in the Ministry of Agriculture are very concerned about the African swine fever. So what is ASF and how is it spread? ASF is a viral disease that can severely impact our local pig industry on an economic level. ASF can be spread in two main ways. Directly, that is contact between healthy, sick, and dead animals, or even tissue which comes from an infected animal. Or indirectly, like garbage containing infected meat, or even eating swill. They can also get it from contaminated premises, vehicles, equipment, tools, or anything that came into contact with an infected animal. Clinical signs of this disease include reddening of the skin on the tips of the ears, snout, tail, extremities, chest, and abdomen, heavy discharge from the eyes or nose, loss of appetite and weakness, vomiting, high temperature, diarrhea, respiratory distress, or an increase in mortality. If you suspect ASF on your farm, notify the veterinary services as soon as possible by calling 535-0220 or 0221 or 0226. These simple measures are your best protection. Protect your investment. Help us keep African swine fever out of Barbados.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ingrid Burrows, and I'm going to give you some tips on managing your hypertension. The first thing you should do is to decrease your salt intake. You should keep your salt intake to less than 1 gram a day. This is equivalent to about 1 teaspoon of salt every day. Another thing you should do is to ensure that you're getting enough physical activity. You should aim for 150 minutes of aerobic exercise every week of moderate intensity. For example, brisk walking, light jogging, swimming, or running. This equates to half an hour of exercise 5 days a week. You also want to increase your intake of fresh fruits and vegetables. It is advised that you eat 5 servings of fruit and vegetable every day. And the last thing you can do is monitor your blood pressure at home with a digital machine. This is very important as some patients have elevated blood pressures while in the doctor's office while having normal blood pressures at home. This is called white coat hypertension. Also, if you're taking medication for your hypertension and you notice any changes in your blood pressure, you can call your doctor and he or she can adjust your medications to suit. If your readings are too high or too low, you can inform your doctor and he or she can adjust your medications appropriately. I hope these tips have been helpful.
Hi, I'm Caroline Gittins, a quarantine officer with the Veterinary Services Department of the Ministry of Agriculture. There's a disease called African swine fever that is affecting domestic and wild pigs worldwide. Even though it is not harmful to humans, it has the potential to wipe out every pig in Barbados. If you or your family members are traveling to Barbados, apply for a meat permit from the Veterinary Services Department. This permit tells you if it is safe to bring pork products from the country that you intend to travel to. Purchase products only in their original packaging that are clearly labeled with the inspection stamp. That means no bacon or sausages from the deli in the supermarket or from a butcher's shop. Do not cook it since the disease can survive high temperatures. When you reach Barbados, we ask that you declare all your meat products to the customs officer. We need your help in keeping Barbados safe from African swine fever. Welcome back. Now, before the break, Mrs. Sargeant, we were talking about, well, you mentioned that money plays a big role in men being able to see their children. A fellow men's advocacy group just a few days ago would have mentioned that men are being used as ATMs. Sometimes they're handing over the child support payments and the payments are being used for all kinds of things. Is that something you're seeing?
It happens. It happens. It has been happening. It is not fair that these things happen. I guess if a man work for his money and put the money there to support the child should be supported. You know, we have situations where sometimes men are really taken advantage of and used because then you can't see the child unless you pay X amount of money or if you don't receive the money on time. And to my mind, it really contributes to what we say is emotional abuse. A lot of men are very depressed because of that, you know. And then on the flip side, for those men who may not have the money, what happens then? You definitely cannot see that child to maintain a relationship. Some of the most impactful times in a child's life, trust me, they had nothing to do with money. You know, just a simple conversation, putting a child to bed, you know, reading a book to a child, just being there. Sometimes, I mean, I would tell females, yeah, even in a situation where a man is unemployed, there are ways that you can still work it out. You know, he can keep the child, give you some freedom, relax a bit. You know, let him keep the child. Let him help with online school. That has been another thing. I mean, there was a time I was doing online school with my son, and the belief only women do online school. But fathers do online school too. You know, money is not all to fathering, and from the time we only focus on money, then we lose the whole essence of what parenting is supposed to be. And then we rob that child also, because it's a selfish act, because the child is the one that will not benefit, or the child is the one that will be affected by this whole issue. So you said this is a whole cycle and things that we really need to look at. For the organization though, let me tell you what we are doing is that we realize that money plays a major part. And our motivational Monday sessions are focusing on helping men make money. How do they turn their skills into dollars? How do they access the internet? How do they use social media to their advantage? How do they really, you know, transform themselves? So that is one of the things that we really want to do in terms of helping men to get money into their pockets, and even linking them with different resources that will be available across the island to help them, whether it be government or non-government, in terms of helping them to move to another level and get money in their pockets. So, you know, it is a major thing, and we are trying our best to make sure we get men with money in the pockets. But for those men who don't have, we are still trying to work with families and mothers to say, well, look, you know, this man still needs to see his child. We help with hampers sometimes. If we get vouchers or whatever we can, and men are proud. A man don't want to know that nobody getting there or getting handouts. You know, we had situations where men were locked away in a house during the COVID time. They had nothing to eat and they saying nothing. A neighbor or somebody, again, will have to reach out and say, well, look, I know X. Can you help him? I understand confidentiality, and sometimes I may reach out my own cupboard if I got 2 things I take out one. You know, I may reach out to the guys. There's a church group that I'm affiliated with. I reach out to them, send a message to them and say, listen, I need some food stuff. You know, and there are people who would donate. So we've been helping men in that regard, trying to get some social assistance, and whether it be food or whatever the case is, out to men who need it. And trust me, there are a lot of men out there who don't have the means right now.
We also hear a lot about single mothers, but there are single fathers as well. But we don't ever hear about them needing the support from the mother.
Yes, correct. But that is a whole other dynamic, because sometimes some of these men even find it difficult when they go through the court system to get child support from the mother, you know. So a lot of these men make up in their mind, well, I'm doing this for my child, regardless of whatever the outcome is, you know. So I know of single fathers who went through the court system, who've had challenges, continue to have challenges, but they do what they have to do. They do what they have to do as fathers. They support the children. And I guess sometimes we look at it as they wouldn't be children forever. You know, children grow up and they get big and they get to see. And they encourage men to fight. Don't you ever give up on that child. Don't ever give up. Don't give up and say, look, you know what? You've been along with that. And that is very common in men. A man say, get too hard, you can change your hand and paint areas. See me done with that. You can have it. I'm done with it.
But I've also heard of instances where the child lives with the father, but because of a court order, the father is still paying child support to the mother.
Now, this is what happens, right? Is that a lot of men don't understand the system. Again, it boils down to lack of knowledge and understanding of our judicial system. While that may be the case, sometimes the men can go back to the court. The men do not go back to the court. The men do not go back to court and say, well, look, the child is living with me. I am supporting the child. This is the evidence. You see, the difference between a lot of women and men is that the women just keep the evidence. The women has got receipts. They can got everything. When you ask a man, and I am telling you this from experience, and I can speak probably from men that come my direction. Do you have receipts or anything? Some men may, some men may not. I find very few that may have, look, I got a file. Some men And you ain't got nothing. I said, but you ain't got no proof. You have no evidence to say that this child, you've been supporting this child. You know? So they have to understand the system. They have to understand what it is they need to do to navigate the system. So there's a need also for that legal education. And men are lacking in that area tremendously. But they can go back to the court, something that they do not usually do. And I encourage men to use the system. If there's a provision for you to go back to the court and have the order dealt with, then do that. You know, sometimes there's legal aid there. You can ask a question, but don't just sit in the house and say, see me done with that, and you're dealing with the court. Yes, it can be a bit stressful, that back and forth in the court system. But if they do not go back, sometimes they end up owing the court thousands of dollars, and they were supporting the child. You understand? And when they're supporting the child was actually living with them in their house, and they're still having to pay support to the court.
Do you find that instances like these, where men go through so much, that then leads to, you know, a deterioration of their mental health?
Of course. Men are human. You know, sometimes again, culturally, we believe that men are supposed to be the strongest animals out, but men break down. Men have emotions. Men get sad. They get weak. They feel depressed as well, you know. Men go through all the emotions that women go through. They just deal with them differently. And there's hardly any avenues for men specifically to really express themselves, hence why this group has been formed, you know. But I really would like to really reach out to a lot of the charities in the community and churches or whatever to pay attention to the men around them. You know, a new group doesn't have to form, even though that I am a big advocate for other men's groups to evolve. But a lot of these social organizations, whether it be a football club, basketball club, church, you know, family members, pay attention. Pay attention to those men that are close to you. Men that sometimes if you really check certain things and realize the behavior has changed. He's dressing differently. His pattern has changed, you know. How you respond, he's being a lot more sharp. He's not sleeping well. He's not shaving as much. He ain't getting a haircut. You know, and there are a lot of signs that you can really look out for that can really indicate where there's a deterioration in that mental health state. Each one of the polyclinics across Barbados have a mental health clinic, and you know that also needs to be known. And you can go to the polyclinics, and you definitely will be able to see someone at the polyclinics. Outside of that, reach out. I want to encourage men. You know, being vulnerable does not mean weakness. It does not mean weakness. It is actually strength. It is that you as an individual identify that there is something wrong, something that needs fixing, and you get it fixed. It's like a wall that you break down your walls, but when they're broken down, you build them back even stronger. So being vulnerable and giving ourselves and crying and really expressing yourself and saying, well, you know, I am not happy.
Do you find, though, that men are more comfortable now than a few years ago in showing emotion, crying, as you said?
Well, yeah, I find that it is happening. We still have a long way to go. There's still that false sense of masculinity out there that men don't cry, or men are supposed to do this, or men are supposed to do that. But there have been some improvements. And I must tell you, from the experiences of our men's talk sessions, I've seen men, men just break down crying, you know, and that was a sight that you would not ordinarily see. And then men continue to come up to these group sessions. Men continue to come and just listen and share just for that period of time, you know, and just to connect with another brother, just to offer support, because there are men who come to the group sometimes and may not say much, but they're just there for that support because they understand the importance of that connection, the importance of that support and connectivity of another brother. And we need a lot more of these sessions across Barbados. I remember during the COVID time, we had an online session where we encouraged a church to do the same men's talk, and they did it with their men. But they had a lot of older men. I mean, some older men probably over the age of 50 are retired, right? And even that session ended in tears. Even that session, although it was on a virtual platform, ended in tears. I don't like to do sessions on virtual platforms because confidentiality is very limited. You don't know who's in the background of somebody else that may be able to take that information somewhere. But those men at that point in time felt vulnerable enough to share and ended in tears even in that setting. And that church, I guess, it opened up the pastor and everybody else's eyes to the importance, because he was saying, but we just got church every Sunday. We just asked people to come up and, so we could pray for you. We have these things going on, but why here? Why now? Because the whole context, the discussion changed. It was all men. The setting is different. And they were identifying with the challenges that another man was facing. So when a man thinks that he's the only person going through it, then to hear another man going through it is like, for true? And then they start to open up, because then they can share experiences and help by sharing each other's strengths as well. So they hold on to each other and build and empower themselves.
Throughout our chat, you have constantly said that the system is disadvantageous to men in many respects. Do you think that men are not celebrated enough?
Of course. Listen, we don't celebrate men. We hardly celebrate men. And usually, that is one of the things that we focus on in our sessions. We ask men to validate themselves. Say something good about yourself. When you do something, drink a drink, go and celebrate, Say, well, I did a good job. We ask men to validate self. We try to validate each other in the group. We always start with positives. We look at positives. And then when we look at the national initiatives, sometimes like Father's Day. Father's Day is not as hyped as Mother's Day.
That is an unbeaten argument.
International Men's Day is a very old event. All right, somewhat old event. The 19th of November every single year. And it is only in recent times that people really start to acknowledge that there's an International Men's Day. The last one we had, we tried to hype it up, and I mean people all over, all over the radio stations and all over social media. They're putting up the things, celebrating men. I remember there was one point in time I had an interview, and the interviewer, another male, International Men's Day, and he started telling me about all the negatives, and he said, stop. We're celebrating men today. Yes, we have our deficiencies. Yes, we're not 100% good. Things happen. That's life. That's human behavior. But we are celebrating men today. We're talking about the positives. And if you have a difficulty with speaking about the positive of other men, speak about the positive of yourself. And he just shut down. He started to smile. Because he said, people like you, we need people like you who are influential. Because he was a very popular guy. And he started to smile. He said, well, yes, you have a point. So we need to celebrate men. We need not only, even children, young boys, not just put them in the court section in the newspaper or flash it all across social media when things don't go right. Celebrate whenever they do good things, whenever they're successful in some areas. And it don't always have to be academics. It could be in any area. We need to celebrate men. We need to make men feel loved and wanted and accepted in the family structure. And that's why we got a lot of fellas gravitating towards the block, because they don't feel accepted home. They don't get that validation home. They don't get that love home. They don't get that feeling I belong. But when they go out and they're about a group of guys who give them some responsibility, and who make them feel belong and accepted and loved, whether real or not, that's where they go. And then they end up getting involved sometimes in some very not so good behavior.
The roles of men, have they changed in society?
Yes, they have changed tremendously. And they are changing, they are evolving. The challenge we have is that a number of people do not acknowledge that it is evolving. We have a lot of the older generation, men in particular, who believe that a man should go out and he should be the sole breadwinner in the house, who believe that women should be home, bearing babies, cooking, cleaning, washing. But the whole system has changed, and I think men need to accept and understand that, that is changing. We have a lot more men who want to stay at home with the children. We have a lot more men playing roles in the children that traditionally you'd only see women. We have a lot more fathers you know, wanted to be there with the children. And we have men who want to stay home. We've got women who going out, who want to work. Women are elevating, our leaders are women, you know. So it is changing. It is a process. But the only way that we can get through this process is acknowledging that a change is happening. And that is where sometimes you're about that stalemate position. I find it also, as I said, with the older men who believe when women progressing too fast or whatever the case is. And this is what I would have seen. I know some people may disagree with me, but this is my analysis, where a lot of the older men who are not supportive of the elevation of women socially and who believe that men are not doing what they're supposed to do, when really and truly it's not that they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is go out there, work hard, and not get an education or whatever the case is, but men are now being a lot more involved in the family structure and in their children's lives, and in that, you know, that whole concept of family, they're paying a lot more attention to.
Tell me about men's plans going forward.
Wow, men's plans going forward. We have so much plans. I think the ultimate plan is to get a place where we can call home, our hostel. And we didn't touch on it earlier, but one of the things I see coming out recently, particularly during the COVID time, is homelessness amongst young boys. You know, you have a high unemployment rate. A lot of the households can't really afford to feed everybody in there. You know, sometimes you're struggling. And 16, 17, 18 years old, you're considered a young man. You're going to fend for yourself, come back for yourself, as the BHS was saying. And I'm finding a number of these boys on the streets quietly because they don't want anybody to know. Unless you really tap into somebody's story, you would not know that there are some of these boys who are actually homeless. So we would like to have a facility or a hostel or a transition program where we get these boys to come in, teach them skills, and get them back out into the world, you know, help to bridge that gap between home and the general world or manhood itself. So that is where we really would like to go. We also want to focus on doing some more, to be a lot more present in the social media space. We were looking at doing some videos to highlight men in a real intimate way, in a way that people will not realize, you know, get people to see the softer side of men. So those are some videos, a project that we're looking to do at some point. Again, we're just looking for funding to get a lot of these things off the ground. But ultimately, we will continue with our men's talks, our motivational Mondays, and our counseling program, which is very, very, very critical for those men, particularly as it relates to the deteriorating mental health position of them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sargeant, for speaking to us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. That was Mr. Fabian Sargeant, the president and founder of the Men Empowerment Network Support. I'm Lisa Lord. Thank you so much for joining. Good evening.